looks like the website is the internet is not good enough. So I try to shut down the video. Yeah, so you can't see my ugly face. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay, the intertidal ecosystem. The intertidal zone is the zone frequently submerged by water or emerged to air frequently. It's based on the tidal cycle, Okay, and there are lots of species living in this area. For example, and also there are some very important ecosystem. For example, the mangrove, the salt marsh, the rocky shore. So intertidal ecosystem are among the highest biodiversity ecosystem in the world. And for long term, it have been served as a studying system for many ecology series. So, okay. So for this class, I will mainly talk about two topics. The first topic is how to handcast body temperature, and what's the pattern in last 40 years along China's coast. This is one paper published by this is mainly one paper published by Ma Lingxuan, yeah. And the other part is about the how can we compare the genomic information to show the species distribution shift. And also this paper is mainly by Lin Xiaonie. So this is two case study. It's not as general as Professor Salah mentioned. These are just two case study. So firstly is the hand casting. I think maybe some people are not familiar to the word hand cast. Hand cast is mean everybody needed not maybe forecast. Forecast is means like the future. Hand cast is means like the 又不行了，
就刚才网络波动的原因。
不知道哎。Okay. 可能 maybe the internet is not good enough. Yeah. 可以了是吧？ Maybe the internet is not good enough. I think maybe this is whose fault? Maybe Trump. Yeah. Okay, so we talk about the hand cast. It means like past. So we can base on the change, the trend of change, to know what's happened in last decades, in last few decades. So intertidal system, as we mentioned before, intertidal species usually served as a model for studying climate-driven regime shift. And also intertidal system is, you can say, it's a very extreme heat stress, very hot. Sometimes it's really hot. The temperature can over 60 Celsius degree, 60 degree. It's crazy hot. And also the temperature is very highly dynamic. That means highly fluctuating based on the tidal cycle. So it's a very extreme thermal environment we should think about. So that's why it is a model system to study the impact of the climate change. 又不行了。我稍微停一下，我再那个再重新共享一下。共享是共享的是桌面，对呀，应该没问题。 don't know. 是这样子，这样可以吗？能看吗？Okay, so let's go for, but in the intertidal, but in the intertidal system, when you go to the go to the sand beach, the rocky shore, you can find the morphology, the topology of the rocky shore is very, very, very complex. You can find in the, for example, you go to the beach, you can see the tidal pool, you can see the exposed rock, you can see, so that means that the habitat is very, very different. So it's the heterogeneity, it's very, very high heterogeneity. It's very complex. So that means that we need to know, for example, in the summer, in summer, we have to, sometimes we need to go to we really want to go to the shaded area. Yeah, we go to the shaded area is relatively cool, but when we go to the sun exposed area, it's really, really hot. It's the same cases in the intertidal zone. Sometimes the animal want to go to the shaded area. Sometimes they don't want to go to the sun exposed area. And also for many intertidal species, they are they are very, 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 they don't have the thermal, they don't have really good thermal regulation mechanism. So they living very near to their upthermal limits. That means like the increase of temperature will kill the animal, will kill the animal. So you can say here, you can say in here you can, in the sun exposed area, you can find many individual can here you can see many individuals can be killed by high temperature. And also the thermal, the intertidal ecosystem, they usually, as we mentioned, in the tidal zone is covered by the water, sometimes it is exposed to the air. So they experience two potential environments, that a marine lake environment and a terrestrial lake environment. So you can find it's a very high dynamic. Sometimes it's submerged by water, sometimes it's exposed to the sun. So it's the environment is very high dynamic. And also, sometimes it's we usually for large scale, very large scale experiment, we usually use the air temperature, our water temperature to simulate, to think it's maybe the body temperature for the species, for the individual, but actually it's no. Air temperature doesn't mean that body temperature. For example, in this room, I know for example, in Qingdao now, in the outside now today is relatively, it's quite hot. Today is maybe outside is 27, 28 Celsius degree. I know some of you in southern China, now maybe 38 Celsius degree. But inside, in the room, inside, the temperature may be just 23, 24. So, and also, so that means that the air temperature doesn't mean body temperature. But unfortunately, many people, they just, when we do the large scale analysis, they think like air temperature, water temperature, the environmental temperature is body temperature. So we need to think about how can we simulate or evaluate, how can we measure the body temperature? So here you can see, actually, for we think about the species, the animal on the shore, so on the rock, you can see it's usually it's how it's get energy, get heat from the environment. Also, they also from the body to the environment, they keep a balance. They want to keep a balance, and then the heat stored in the body is you can, based on the heat stored in the body, you can do the simulation of the body temperature. This model means the heat-bodied model. Heat-bodied model is have been used for many terrestrial species, especially for reptile. For reptile like a lizard, gecko, like this species, and the snake. But it's some people start to use this heat-bodied model for intertidal species, for Professor McDaniel in Stanford and Braunhammers in Northeastern. They use the and David Vesey in South Carolina, University of South Carolina. They want to use this, but for they usually use it for a local scale. That means in a specific size, but not too many people use it for really large scale, very big, large scale for maybe over 1,000 kilometers. No, they never done this stuff. So for in this study, we really want to know how to simulate body temperature in relatively high resolution, maybe in few kilometers. And we want to also, based on the simulated temperature, we want to know what are the difference between body temperature and the environmental temperature. Environmental temperature here it means like air temperature and the water temperature. And also we want to know where are the hotspots? Where is the hotspots of thermal stress and climate change? That means that some place we really need to think about the impact of climate change. So that's the three questions we want to answer in this part. Okay, so here is the framework for this study. So you can, firstly, we generally divide it into two parts. The first part is the body temperature simulation. That means we how to simulate the body temperature. The other part is, the second part is based on the simulated temperature, how can we do the analysis? So the simulation work can be divided into three parts. The first part is we get the microclimate data. This is the other part. We do the simulation, and then we do the validation. Because for all the model, you need to do the validation. Validation is means like when you do the simulation, and then you get the real data, you compare the real data and the simulated data to say the model validation, as to whether your data is good or not. When you get the simulated data, so you can do the analysis to answer our question. Okay, so this is not a really complex. In theory, it's not very complex, but it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult. You get the data, you do the simulation, you do the validation. Fortunately, we get all this data. We can download the climatic data and also the hydrology data, like the tidal height, like the wave height, and also the climate data like air temperature, sea surface temperature, wind speed, shortwave radiation, cloud cover and soil moisture, and then we can get the data, the microclimate model. So yeah, actually you can find a really useful package, the niche mapper. You can use the niche mapper to do this stuff. And also you can, because the animal with different morphology, different shape, they also have different, they will have different body temperature. So we need to measure the shape of the body. We need to measure the shape of the body and also do the validation. So Lin Xuan have done lots of this stuff in the field. Yeah, in the field. So finally, when you get all the data, you can, based on the equation, you can calculate the body temperature. There is the validation part, verification part. You can measure all the data and looks like the model works very well, So based on these techniques, we get a simulated temperature data set. Okay, so the next part will be the data analysis. So we get like over 20 species along the whole China coastline. Actually, not only China coastline, we can go from the Southeast Asia, include Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, yeah, and Japan and Korea. We can get maybe the South Asia data. We can over 20 species. You can say for some species it's really hot. For some species it's not that hot. It looks like you can find like different species have different body temperature, and also you can say that the tidal height. The high tidal species, the height in the tidal species usually suffer high body temperature. And some species, for example, the limpet, maybe you guys know the limpet, maybe don't know the limpet, but the limpet is like the similar size, like the abalone, maybe, yeah, the gastropod. That's a gastropod. They have the highest body temperature. Why this species have the highest body temperature? Because this guy is very flat. They have lots of solar radiation, can absorb lots of energy, lot of heat from the sun. So let's say this species will be experience large scale mortality. That's the limpet. And also it's clearly show the pattern of temperature increase in the last 40 years. You can see since the 1980s to the 2020, so you can find the clearly increase of body temperature. It's not only body temperature, you can see the air temperature, the water temperature, and the body temperature. Clearly show, you can see the body temperature, the increase of body temperature relatively higher than the air temperature and the water temperature. You can see let's say here it is 0.027. This is 0.0222. So body temperature increased more rapidly than environmental temperature. We also usually, when we think about climate change, we also think about morphology. Morphology means like the seasonality of some physiology traits, like reproduction and growth, something. You can see the seasonality. The impact of seasonality also very, very different. You can say the warming rate of body temperature, is especially higher in spring and summer for some species. So the seasonal phenological trend may be misestimated in the context of global warming. So we need to really think about the phenology. Also, we can, based on the body simulated body temperature, we can see the heat wave. That's what we name the biological heat wave. You can see the biological heat wave, you can clearly show both the days and the intensity of heat wave increased. It's increased rapidly. So you can say also biological heat wave is also a big problem. And also you can say the heat wave based on the environmental data and the body temperature data are quite different. Okay, the third question is where is the hotspot? Where is the hotspot? So you can say, okay, based on the annual extremely body temperature, like the T99, 99 is the 99, T99 is the 99 percentile of body temperature in the whole year, the T99. You can find there are some hotspots. You can find in the Beibu one and Beibu Bay, and the some area in the affected by the crucial in Japan, and also the Yangtze River estuary, and also you can see some bay like in the Bohai Laizhou Bay. Based on the heat wave, the biological heat wave, you can also find some hotspots like in the Beibu Bay and the crucial affected area and Korea, and also the Bohai Bay. So you can see that based on this one, you can say you can find some area most affected by climate change. We should think about the climate change and make some planning work in this area. So we need to pay more attention to this area. So for this part, some take-home message is environmental temperature tend to underestimate present biological thermal stress and the future risk and climate change. So we need, so that means like sometimes we need to think more about the body temperature and also environmental temperature, assessment of biological seasonal phenology and achievement perfect very poor. So it's also think that imply the importance of body temperature simulation. And also based on the analysis of hotspots, some area we need to make better planning work, like in Bohai Bay, the Yangtze River estuary, the Yangtze River, the Hangzhou Bay, and the Beibu Gulf in this area. And also body temperature should be used as an appropriate metric for evaluating and predict impact of global change. So this paper published last year in Global Change, Global Ecology and Biogeography. If you are interested, you can try to find this book, this paper online. Okay, let's go to the next part, the next session. So we know the global change here, and the increased temperature, increased heat wave, something like this. So now we want to know the species distribution shift. How can we evaluate and predicating species distribution shift? But sometimes there are many different kind of model, many different kind of distribution model, but most of this model ignoring the physiology trait and the genetic trait. because many people, many studies have seen like along the coastline, different populations usually have different thermal performance, usually have different upthermal limits. But sometimes, and also not sometimes, actually, in most times, we think at least one species, they have one thermal limit, upthermal limit, one lethal temperature. Actually, this is not true. This is not the case. So we need to think about the difference in thermal limit, in lethal temperature, and we try to put them into the species distribution model. In my idea, I think this is almost the most challenging stuff for global change biology recently. That means how can we put physiology, plasticity, local adaptation, and into the modeling. That means we need to have lots of data, new data, physiology data, genetic data, environmental temperature data. We need to have this data. So now I will very briefly introduce our other work. How can we put the physiology and genetic traits into the species distribution model? Okay, so we can say many species were predicted to experience northward migration and global warming. That is one very good case study along China coastline is the Narita iodine. Narita iodine is one gastropod. So in last 40 decades, 40 years, this species have moved northward gradually. And it was a southern species, but now recently they moved over the Yangtze River estuarily and moved to the northern China. So now you can find in Jiangsu province. And also based on some previously simulation work, you can find many species they can move to further north. And also you can see the climate-driven reshape and for many different species. But you can also see that there are many different genotypes and different phenotypes and different population. We need to think about the intraspecific and variation in both physiology and genetic. And also there are some study, they try to put the variation into the species distribution model simulation, but looks like it's a big challenge. It's a very big challenge, very big challenge. And also this stuff is a very early stage. So now we use one species, like one species. It's a common species along China coastline. This the Literaria brevicula. It's a Literaria brevicula is widely distributed along the China coastline. That's with a southern distribution limit in the Taiwan Strait in this area. There is one in Taiwan Strait. So we have two hypotheses. The first hypothesis is heat stress can drive phenotypic and genetic divergence. That's like the temperature can affect the physiology trait and the genetic trait along in different population along China coastline. And also the impact of climate change may have different impact for different genotype or different phenotype. So that's two hypotheses. So for this one, we need to get a lot of we need to get a lot of data. We need to get a lot of environmental data, high resolution environmental data, maybe also body temperature data, and also we need to get physiology data in different population and population, and also we need to get some genetic data for this stuff. We need to get firstly we get a genome. We get the genome of Littorina brevicula for this species. Littorina, we get a chromosomal level genome for this species. Looks like it's the quality of this genome is not really good, not that perfect, but I think this is one of the highest genome for gastropod, because gastropod it's quite difficult to get the high quality genome for gastropod. And also we get a lot of the resequencing the genome for many species, many individuals along the whole coastline. So you can see from Yantai from Yantai to Xiamen, from Yantai to Xiamen, we get lots of population and individual, and do the resequencing. There's a resequencing of different individual. Based on the genomics, based on the genomic information, it's clearly shown like this species can be divided, these populations can be divided to two genetic groups. One is the southern group, the other is the northern group. Thus, with a barrier of Yangtze River estuary. You can find the southern group and clearly here, and this is the northern group. And also there are small barrier, small break in the Yantai and the Dalian. The Yantai group is slightly different from the northern group. Looks like is a small divergence here. Here is a regular historical population demography work. It's a regular historical population demography stuff. You can find like in last, you can see in last glacial maximum experience of rapid population expansion. It's not like many species like this. And also you can find there are different in the southern population, southern group and the northern group. They have different selective pressure to this population. Genetic is very different. It looks like the southern population experienced a very high, relatively higher pressure from high temperature. This is regular. It looks like a regular genetic phylogeography study, but with this information, you can see there are two genetic groups. The most interesting part of this study, you can find we also measure the thermal limits. That means the lethal temperature of this species along the whole coastline. You can find the different species have the different individual. They have very divergent, very different thermal limits. Different population, the upper thermal limits is very different among population and among individuals. among individuals. So, and also when we do the genome-wide association, that's a so-called GWAS. GWAS analysis, you can put the optimal limits and the genetic information, you put them together, you can know which gene, which genetic loci have the impact on the optimal limits. So you can find like some specific loci can affect the thermal limits. And also, when you find the genetic loci, you can develop some like SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism size. Maybe some of you not familiar to the genetic stuff, but anyway, you can find some specific loci. That means that some specific genetic position connected to the thermal performance, the thermal limits. So based on the thermal limits, based on thermal limits, based on the genotype, you can develop, you can divide the population to different groups, different genetic groups. That means for one population, maybe 100 individual, you can divide it to different genotype with different thermal limits. So now you have previously we usually do the simulation species distribution model for one species, but now we have 6, 7, 8 genotypes with different optimal limits. That means the different genotypes have different response to future climate change. So when you go to, so you can say, if we do the simulation for one species, so you can find like, okay, if we treat like one species, looks like all the species, they can survive, the species can survive. But when you divide it into different genotypes, you will find some genotypes will disappear. That means that even the species can survive in the context of climate change, but some adaptive genotype will disappear. That means the genetic diversity will decrease. This is a very, very important finding because that means the biodiversity, species biodiversity can be maintained, but genetic diversity will be decreased. This paper published in, I think last year in Global Change Biology. If you are interested, you can I think you can read this paper. So there are some take-home message for this study, like means that temperature play a very important role in driving the divergence of the northern and the southern lineage. Yeah, maybe for some species, this is the case in China, but maybe not in other cases. Maybe in some area, maybe they have the eastern and the western genetic structure, but you can find like based on the whole genome resequencing, you can also find the phylogenetic structure. And also based on the physiology study, you can find there are very, very high intraspecific. And that means inter-individual variation. That means that the different individual, they have different optimal limits. That means also looks like we are all are human beings, but some guys are really good to drinking. They can drink lots of beer, but the other guy not good, maybe only 1 glasses of beer. So there are very high inter-individual variation. And also for the thermal tolerance, it's also true. It's also true. So different individual have different thermal tolerance. Why the difference happen? One thing is the physiological. One thing is the physiological plasticity. That means that acclimation. Maybe people you're living in different environment for a long time, that you will have different thermal tolerance. That's we use the alcohol, the drinking as one example. If you keep drinking, maybe you can drinking more. If you don't drinking for a long time, maybe you drink less. That's acclimation. The other reason is genetic. Genetic. Some people have can drink really good drinker, maybe genetic. So that means that the genetic is also a very important issue. So for this study, we put the physiology and the genetic together and put them to species distribution model. So now we found like we can build some individual based physiological and genetic variation model with a broader biogeography pattern along the whole China coastline. It may be 2,000 kilometers. And we found like the maybe for this species, for Littorina brevicula, for this species, the species diversity maybe can be maintained, if can possibly maintained in future. But the adaptative, the genetic diversity may be lost. So for this class, we provide, we based on Professor Gianluca's introduction, I just simply provide 2 case study for you guys to thinking. That's one thing is climate change can increase the body temperature, can make it increase the body temperature, and also can change the biological heat wave. But this is not uniform along the coastline. Sometimes somewhere are hotspots, somewhere are not the hotspots. Maybe for some hotspots, we need to really think about and pay more attention to for marine planning, special planning, maybe for biodiversity conservation, for aquaculture stuff. And also maybe one thing we need to think about is like there are very high inter-individual variation in both physiology and genetics. When we do the evaluation and the forecasting, we need to really think about the physiology diversity and the genetic diversity. Looks like we can find one way to put the genetic and the physiology into the modeling. And with the high resolution body temperature model, we can do some stuff. But this is very different from the previously model. We need a lot of information. Physiology, we need a lot of physiology data, genetic data. It take a lot of time, and we also take a lot of money. Yeah, so we really need a collaboration for this. Okay, that's all my lecture. So I'm really happy to take any questions. So if you have any question, yeah, welcome for question. Okay.
About the Sudan,
Yeah.
about this sort of adaptation and physiological adaptation, what is your expectation from the Mediterranean littoral? Because the tidal amplitude is totally different. Here you have 5 meters. In the Mediterranean, we have only half meter.
Yes, I think listen.
Which is the expectation.
Yeah, so Professor Salah's question is what's the difference between China and the Mediterranean? That means the Italy, the Europe. What's the difference? Because in the Mediterranean area, the tidal range is really small. It's really small. It's maybe few less than 1 meter, maybe. But in China, the tidal range is really high. It's usually over five, maybe some in some areas over 10 meters. So the wave is make the thermal the thermal like means temperature heterogeneity may be very different. In my idea, I think maybe the thermal environment, the dynamic pattern may be will be different, but tidal and the wave may be only one impact, one factor, a factor the environmental heterogeneity. We still have some like shaded area, sun exposed area, and the tidal pool. So maybe it's really good to do the comparison between China and Europe and the Mediterranean to maybe we also do the simulation about the body temperature. It will be yeah actually me Lin Xuan has listed already has listed already. We can do the compare the thermal the body temperature of Middle Scalo provinces between China and the Mediterranean, and then we can also measure the maybe heart rate, maybe oxygen consumption, and also do some genetic study to try to find the the effect size, maybe the difference in body temperature, difference in upper limit, different in genetic structure. Uh, I remember in 2017, Guo Dong did published one paper in 2017. He based on simplified genetic data. They found like Mediterranean, there are very big difference in genetically, clearly genetic difference between Mediterranean Gulf provinces and China species. Local China population looks like Chinese population has relatively higher optimal limits compared to the Mediterranean one because the individual, the animal in China, we usually have suffered relatively higher temperature. Because it's a wider range. Yeah, this is a really good one. We definitely talk later. Okay, so if no any more question, so bye bye guys, bye.